After a long day of work, I was driving home and starving hungry. I stopped at a McDonald's because it was just about the only place still open. After getting there, I decided to park in the parking lot and go inside to order. The drive-through line was sort of long, and I thought it might be faster to just order inside. When I got inside the building, nobody else was in there other than employees. One employee stood behind the counter and I walked up and ordered. After ordering, the employee went into the back and told me that they would be out with my order shortly. I then stood there getting hungrier and hungrier by the second. As I waited, I glanced around the empty restaurant. That's when I noticed what appeared to be two men. They were not inside the restaurant exactly, but in the space between the first doors you walk in and then the second set of doors. The thing that really caught my attention, though, was that they were wearing masks. The masks looked like they were possibly from some movie or something, but they were really creepy. The guys just stood there inside. I looked away and continued to wait for my order. Probably about a minute later, the door opened and I saw the two men walking in. They made their way immediately to the left and inside the seating area of the restaurant. Then they went out of sight. The fact that they were not going up to order, but almost going to hide, was kind of concerning to me. Could they be planning to rob the place or something? That's what went through my head at first. But I quickly pushed that thought away. No way, I told myself. I stood there waiting for probably 2 more minutes. Then a McDonald's employee emerged from the back with my bag. I took it, and in that moment considered letting the employee know about the men in masks who had gone inside, but ultimately I decided not to. I walked away and left the restaurant. I did wonder, though, who those guys were and what they were doing. I was second-guessing myself the whole way as I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Maybe I should have said something, but as I was reaching my vehicle, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around as I was just a couple of feet away from my car door. When I did, I saw both of the two men running at me in a full sprint. They had just left the building and there was no question that they were headed straight for me. I quickly unlocked my car, opened the door, and jumped inside of it. I hit the lock button, and the guys reached my car in less than 5 seconds. They tried opening my doors, and then started aggressively banging on my windows. I did the obvious thing, which was to back up and drive away. The men both kept hitting and kicking at my car as I did. Then they ran off to the far side of the McDonald's building. I got out of there as quickly as I could, and then called the police when I was safely on the road. I'm sure the men probably ran off before the police got there, but I hope they were able to find them. Apparently the men had targeted me. I'm not sure if that was their plan the entire time, if maybe they'd been watching me waiting for me to go in, or maybe they just decided to after seeing me inside. Who knows? What I do know is I'm really glad that I'm okay. After turning 16, my first job was at the local McDonald's. I was excited to finally have a job and earn some money. On quiet Monday night, I found myself working behind the counter with just my coworker. That night had been uneventful, and only a few customers had been there in the last hour. But as the time went by, eventually someone else came in. The man who walked through the door resembled a grown-up version of the eerie kid from the movie Bavarium. That's what I remember thinking. And he towered at an imposing height of probably 6'6". He was lengthy and tall, and he had a very pale complexion also. He was wearing a suit and tie with a black and white polka dot pattern. He seemed a little well-groomed for a late-night visit to McDonald's. For some reason, the guy just kind of freaked me out when I saw him. And unlike other customers, he bypassed the counter and went straight for a corner table. After sitting down at one, he took out a fork and spoon from his pocket and a small plate as well. I was really weirded out by this. He then placed them on the table in front of him. I was trying not to just obviously stare at the guy, but I couldn't help but look. It was a bizarre sight, as if he had come prepared for a meal, yet without any intention of ordering. I was noticing, though, that he kept looking over in my direction. This was pretty strange, and I decided to just ignore the guy. I went back to minding my own business and standing behind the counter. Soon, though, it was time to close up. I didn't really want to have to tell the guy that he had to leave. He seemed off, and I was nervous to approach him. I decided to go back and tell my coworker, hoping maybe he would rather tell the guy to leave. After talking with him in the back for maybe 30 seconds, We came out to see that the man was now gone. I hadn't heard him leave, but he was nowhere in the restaurant. We checked all around, even in the bathrooms and everything. I was so relieved, and we went on with closing up the place. The rest of the night, I drove home from work, got to my apartment, and got ready for bed. It was late, and I was really tired. But as I laid awake in bed, I glanced out my window and couldn't believe my eyes. The same tall, creepy man was walking down the sidewalk. I sat up in disbelief. As he walked by, he stopped and stared, looking right at me. I got up quickly and sprinted over to the window to close the blinds. My heart was now racing and I was breathing heavy. I took a few moments to catch my breath and calm down. I had no idea why this creepy guy was walking right in front of my building. After a few moments, I opened the blinds slightly to look. I saw him walking off far away in the distance. I kept my blinds closed and went back to bed. I still think about this all the time. Maybe it was a coincidence that he happened to be walking by, but it sent shivers down my spine, especially when he looked at me. This took place in McDonald's while my mom was still pregnant with me. I've only ever heard a brief version of this story, but up until now, my mom had given me more detail as to what actually happened. This happened in the 80s. At the time, my mom was pregnant with me, and she was also financially unstable. This resulted in her falling behind on bills, struggling to pay rent, buying groceries, etc. Sometimes she used to have to eat at fast food joints to save some money, as groceries were expensive at the time. One night, my mom had just visited one of her old college roommates and decided to stop for food on the way home. According to my mom, it was around 10 o'clock at night, so there weren't many places open. Eventually, my mom had settled by going to McDonald's, as it was pretty much the only option left. She pulls up to the McDonald's, and as she enters, she instantly notices a man sitting at one of the tables. He's wearing a black coat with his head down and nothing at his table except for a soda cup that appeared to be empty, not wanting to pry and too tired to care. My mom gets her food and sits down at a table to eat. The very second she sits down, the older man on the other side of the restaurant begins to stare intently at her. She had acknowledged this, but decided to ignore it and just eat her food. Now, there's really no way to say this without sounding weird, but my mother was very pretty in the 80s. She'd get a lot of attention from time to time, and while it was strange, she didn't mind it. However, this guy seemed to continue staring at her, even while she kept to herself. As she's eating, the man proceeded to get up and walk over to her to ask her something. He basically had asked her if she had any money on her so that he could buy a drink. Now, my mom was very generous, and even with her financial problems, she loved the idea of putting good in the world. Also, I'm sure she would do just about anything to get him to go away, so she didn't really have a choice. So she looks through her purse and hands him a $5 bill where he then goes to get his drink. After that, then he gets his things and leaves the McDonald's, where my mom let out a sigh of relief. Long story short, she waits about 20 minutes and leaves as well back to her car. Now this is where things take an unexpected twist. As she's in the car, she starts the engine when two police officers come up and tap on her window. She rolls down the window and they instantly ask her if she'd seen a man in a black jacket. At first, she didn't know what they were talking about until she remembered about the man from earlier. Their description of the man inside the restaurant, they tell her that he was actually a convict who was apparently wanted for murdering his brother and passing it off as a suicide. My mother was horrified as they told her this. The cops took down her info and description and left. My mom still tells me about this story of how she came in contact with a killer, but wasn't sure if he was ever found. Just makes you wonder how many people like him are out there who have never been caught. I guess you really never know who you're talking to. I used to work at a McDonald's right after I finished high school. One busy Saturday, I found myself working a shift starting in the morning and ending in the afternoon for basically the entire time. It was really busy. Our location would always get tons of customers, and it was really close to a shopping center, with it being the weekend that also drew many people in. Time sort of flew by that day as we all scrambled to keep up. There were quite a few of us working, and I remember at one point, probably about 1 p.m., the place was really crowded. I got an order to hand out to a customer and I called the number. A woman walked up and accepted it, then walked away, only to return about a minute later. When she did, she was extremely upset. She sought me out and told me that this was not her order. She then angrily demanded her real order. I asked her for her order number, and when she told it to me, I realized that she had grabbed the wrong one. The number that I had called was different. This was her mistake. I told her that her order would be out soon, but she then demanded a refund and said that it should be free. That's when I tried explaining the whole situation to her. It ended up being a total disaster. The place was loud and the woman would not listen to my explanation. It's like she could not accept the fact that she had made the mistake. Honestly, it made me really frustrated, but I kept my cool. Eventually, I called over a manager to help resolve this situation, and I remember the woman specifically reading my name off my name tag and telling it to my manager as if I should get in trouble for this. I just kind of stood there. My manager then told me that she would handle the situation and I could go back to work helping the others. The woman was raising her voice and sort of causing a scene. Just about everybody else in earshot was looking over and staring. At last, after maybe 10 minutes, the woman ended up taking her order and finally leaving. I did my best to forget about it and continue with my work. I helped other customers like normal for about 15 more minutes. Then, it was time for my break. During that time when I worked there, I liked to take my breaks in my car. It was quiet and peaceful away from the busy McDonald's. I would just sit in there and go on my phone or whatever. Then I would go back inside to work. So on this day, I walked out and left the restaurant to head to my car in the parking lot. Almost immediately, though, after leaving the building, I saw the same woman who had put up such a fuss. She was sitting at one of the outside tables. Instantly, our eyes locked for a moment before I couldn't help but look away from her. This was really awkward, and I decided to just ignore it and keep walking out to my car. As I passed her by, I cringed as I couldn't help but notice that she was getting up. She didn't say anything, but I could sense her start to walk behind me. I walked out to my car, and when I reached it, unlocked it and got inside. I refused to entertain the woman following me, but when I was inside my car and in the driver's seat, I noticed that she had walked right up to my driver's window. She then knocked on the window, and I heard her start speaking. I quickly hit lock before she surprisingly tried opening my driver's door. After it wouldn't open, she then knocked on my window. I heard her talking, and she still seemed really angry. I began rolling down my window, curious of what she wanted to say to me. But as soon as I rolled it down, she reached inside for me. I heard her say, "Hey," to me, as I started rolling the window back up the instant that she reached in. I felt in danger and decided to back out and just leave. The woman stood there, shouting at me as I drove my car out of the parking lot and left. I knew that I couldn't go home because I had to return within 15 minutes, because that was how long my break was. I drove around a little and called my boss, letting her know of the situation that just happened. My boss had told me that she was aware of the situation in the parking lot and told me that she was glad I was okay. I said I would be back within the 15 minutes, and I kept my word. When I returned to the McDonald's parking lot, though, it was quite the scene that I was not expecting. There were multiple police cars and flashing lights. I parked and went back inside to learn of what had happened. A few police officers stood around, one talking with our manager. Apparently, after the woman had yelled at me in the parking lot, another employee went outside to try to calm her down. There was another shouting match and a customer ended up calling the police. The woman got arrested for disorderly conduct and attempted assault after she apparently tried punching one of the other employees. All I have to say is that she must have had anger problems or something like that, because I couldn't believe what happened.